I'd like to start this chapter by reading a quote from McConnell's book, "The model of supply and demand is the economic profession's greatest contribution to human understanding because it explains the operation of the markets on which we depend for nearly everything that we eat, drink, or consume." That's a pretty powerful statement. So in this lecture, we're going to look individually at demand and supply. First, we'll characterize the markets and what makes them competitive. We will describe demand and do the same for supply, and how they can change. One of the concepts that we're going to talk about in this lecture is the change in the quantity demanded, or a change in demand, and likewise the change in the quantity supplied and a change in supply. They are different concepts, and we're going to review both of those. A market is an interaction between buyers who are looking to consume products and services and sellers who are looking to sell the same goods and services. The interaction between buyers and sellers in the market can be local, like your neighborhood, national, the United States, or international. Amazon and Alibaba sell their products all over the globe. The market sets the price is a popular phrase used to explain competitive forces in the market. Price is discovered in the interactions of both the buyers and the sellers. We also know that price can change over time, depending upon the reactions of each group. In essence, in a competitive market, price clears the market. Price is the market clearing mechanism in a market that is competitive. The establishment of price for a product or service is a dynamic process that never stops. Demand is the amount consumers are willing and able to purchase at a given price. Every consumer has an individual demand curve, depending upon a whole bunch of things, income, desires, etc. But the sum of each consumer's demand is a schedule or demand curve for a particular product or service. When economists talk about a demand curve, they hold all other things equal, especially in the short term. They are uniquely focused on the relationship of the price and the quantity demanded. So really, they just look at those two variables and make a simplifying assumption that all other things are held constant in order to understand and explain the interactions of price and demand. The law of demand states, other things equal, as price falls, the quantity demanded rises. And conversely, as the price rises, the quantity demanded falls. It is an inverse relationship with a downward sloping curve. There's a common sense element to the law. Price can act as an obstacle to buyers. For example, special sales and discounts, another term for price reduction, attracts more buyers into the market than a standard list price does. There's also the concept of diminishing margin of utility. For example, The price of the first pizza that you eat seems fair. However, the more and more pizzas you eat in a single sitting provides less and less value or utility, and therefore price. Demand also gets influenced by the substitution effect. Assume that we like both chicken and beef. If the price of beef increases, all else equal, then the relative price of chicken goes down, thereby increasing the demand for chicken and reducing the demand for beef. A trade-off. Finally, holding price constant, we can imagine that as our incomes increase, we can buy more of a given product or service without sacrificing purchasing other goods. No trade-off. This is the income effect. Both of these factors can be in play over time. So you really want to understand the substitution effect and the income effect as you review the concepts in this particular lecture. Let's specifically take a look at the demand curve for an individual and review the concept of quantity demanded. On the vertical axis, we have the various price levels for a bushel of corn. This is just an example. It can be anything. The demand curve is downward sloping for all products and services. We're going to use corn in this particular example. On the horizontal axis, we have the quantity demanded in terms of bushels per week. We are giving corn as the example, okay? So for this individual, we can see that at $5 per bushel, the quantity demanded is 10 bushels per week. But at $1, the demand increases to 80 bushels per week. Various points in between are plotted, providing an overall downward sloping demand curve for this individual. The overall market demand curve is made up of the individual demand curves for a given product or service. We can see that the demand curves for Joe, Jen, and Jay are different. Many factors can play a role in the difference. However, the sum of the individual demand curves provides us with the market demand, the total. We can see in the far right column and the initial column of the price per bushel, we can see that at $5 per bushel, the total market demands 30 bushels per week. And at $1, the demand goes up significantly to 221 bushels per week. We see the law of demand in action here. As the price goes down, more is demanded. And the reverse is also true. The first concept we have just learned is about changes in the quantity demanded. Now let's take a look at changes in demand. A different concept that describes shifts in the downward sloping demand curve to the right or to the left. We start with an initial curve of D1, the total demand for corn. Without a change in price, the total demand for corn can shift upwards to the right, represented by D2. Imagine that more consumers just like corn. Or there's a population increase, meaning there's more consumers out there. A shift to the left can also happen, represented by D3. Assume that health doctors say we should just consume less corn. What this shows is that at the same price of $3 per bushel, the demand under D3 is lower than D1. We can see this on the red line, and the demand is higher at D2. So at the same price of the $3 a bushel, we can see what happens at D2. Somewhere around 10 or 11 bushels per week is demanded, but at D3 at the same price, only 4 bushels per week are demanded, and this is in thousands, but you're getting the concept here. So we have two factors moving up and down the D1 curve on those blue dots represents changes in the quantity demanded due to price. The shifts from left to right are a change in demand. There are a number of factors that can affect changes in demand. Today, people are eating healthier, consuming more broccoli, fruit, and salads. Likewise, people are increasing in-store coffee consumption and wine. So, increasing changes in consumer tastes and preferences can shift the demand curves to the left or right. Likewise, concern over cholesterol can shift the demand curve for bacon and eating out. An increase in the total number of buyers consuming certain type of products can influence demand. We should see an increase in the demand for medical care and retirement communities as the population gets older. If we consider an international market, then the demand curve can shift to the right if firms provide their products to new countries. There are just more consumers consuming the product. As income rises, the demand for normal goods, like better furniture and electronics goods, will increase. Normal goods are defined as products whose demand varies directly with income, meaning as our incomes go up, we want more of them. Demand for inferior goods, like hamburger helper, used clothing, and retread tires, varies inversely with income. An increase in income will lessen the demand for an inferior good. For example, the demand for charcoal grills could decline as wealthier consumers switch to gas grills. So inferior goods vary inversely with income. Other determinants of demand would include the change in prices of related goods. And here we have two types. We have complementary goods that are demanded jointly. Okay, let's talk about complements for a second. If the price of hot dogs were to go down, we would expect to see an increase in the demand for hot dogs, and therefore an increase in the demand for hot dog buns. They're related. They're demanded jointly. With a price reduction on electric vehicles, we would expect to see an increase in the demand for electricity. Looking at substitutes, an increase in the price of Fords would lead to an increase in the demand for Chevrolets. More California wine would be sold, if there were an increase in the price of French wine. These are substitutes, or something that can be used in place of another good or service. The cost of H&R Block to do your tax returns went down with the advent of TurboTax software that allowed you to do your own returns at home on the computer. Consumer expectations also matter. Demand for a good could shift outward if consumers think that the price of certain goods are going to go up in the future, that they want to get those particular goods or service at today's price, at the lower price, before the prices go up. Think the stock market. They may elect to go out and buy those products and shift the demand curve to the right in order to get those goods or services at a lower price today. Thus, consumer expectations play a fairly strong role in shifting the demand curves either left or right. Likewise, if I think that my income is going to go up next year, even though the boss hasn't come in and told me that I'm going to get that raise, I may begin to purchase certain normal goods or stop purchasing certain inferior goods based upon my expectation of what my income is going to be next year. Please review the difference between a change in demand and a change in the quantity demanded as part of your final review. This summary chart of examples will help reinforce the learnings on changes in demand. It's a good chart. You can see the determinants here on the left. In the individual examples, I'm not going to read the individual examples, but as you study for a quiz or study for an exam, these are good ways to grasp what is a change in demand and what are those determinants that can shift the demand curve either to the left or to the right. Now let's take a look at the other side of this important economic model, the supply side. Supply is the amount producers are willing to make available for sale at a given price. And, as with demand, we have an individual producer supply schedule and the market supply schedule, which is basically the sum of all of the individual suppliers in a given segment or sector of the marketplace. That makes up the total supply curve, just as we have seen on the total demand curve on the previous slides. Other things being equal, as the price rises, the quantity supplied rises. And as the price falls, the quantity supplied falls. It is an upward sloping supply curve. It has a direct relationship to price. Why? Well, if market prices are going up, it acts as an incentive to produce more and get more revenue. It also acts as an incentive for new competitors to enter the market and increase supply. Conversely, a lower price will act as an incentive to produce less. Yet, beyond some level of production, costs will start to increase. Likewise, there may be just so much existing capacity at the firm, and they will run out of expansion room. But this is basically a short-term look, so the law of supply is upward sloping, and as price goes up, more will be supplied. Let's take a look at the supply of corn at the same price levels reviewed in our demand example. In this particular case, the individual supply of corn at $5 would be 60 bushels per week. And at $1, they'd only want to supply 5 bushels of corn. Adding up all the individual supply curves would generate the market supply at these price levels. Upward sloping, price goes up, more will be supplied. The quantity supplied to the market would be initially represented by the curve S1 in the middle. A change in supply upward would reflect a shift from S1 to S2. We can see that at a price of $3, firms are willing to provide more due to the shift. Shifting to the left, at S3, they are willing to supply less. These are also two important concepts. A change in supply, the shift from the left to the right, and the change in the quantity supplied. Let's just pick S1, the movement at a price of $1 versus the movement of a price at $5. Understand both, just as we stressed in the demand stuff. A change in supply, either way, either shift, can be influenced by changes in a number of different factors. Price is a motivator for suppliers, but profit is the goal. So increases in cost factors or competitive activity can change a producer's ability and willingness to supply at a given price level. A decrease in the price of resources, land, materials, labor, or capital, can provide an incentive to provide more, a shift to the right. If the cost of resources is rising faster than price increases, then there may be less incentive to provide more supply, a shift to the left. Technology is another determinant of supply. You can understand that if a new machine came out that allowed you to substantially decrease the cost of bringing corn to market, either by shucking it faster or packaging it with lower cost, then you would expect that the supply of corn would increase simply because technology allows you to deliver more at a lower cost. The number of sellers coming into the marketplace will shift the supply curve to the right. More competitors, more supply. Just as we looked at more consumers, more demand on the demand side of the equation. Increased taxes, resulting in less profit, would shift the supply curve to the left. Conversely, increased government subsidies, typically to provide more price to the producer than the market allows, would shift the supply curve to the right. If a company is making basketballs and soccer balls with the same technology, then the relative price of each will determine the mix of production and therefore the supply of each to the market, assuming they are relatively interchangeable. If the prices of basketballs rise and the demand falls for basketballs, they may shift their production and increase the supply of soccer balls. Okay, so if stuff can be substituted within the producer's technology, a change in the price of other goods, you can see will shift the demand or the supply of the substitute good within the producer's technology. If producers expect the price of corn will be twice as high next year than it is today, then the corn supply curve will shift to the left. Why? Why would they decrease today's supply? If they expect the price to be lower, then they would increase the supply to take advantage of today's prices. Let's go through that again. If I expect price to be more in the future, my expectations about the price in the future are higher, my current supply curve is going to shift to the left. I'm going to use less of my resources to produce today and more to produce tomorrow when I can get a higher price. And the converse is also true. In summary, there are many market and cost factors that can change supply, a shift in either direction, a change in supply. This summary chart of examples will help reinforce the learnings on changes in supply. Again, here you have some of the determinants on the left that I went through, and some specific examples of what would happen, or specific examples on products and services in terms of this particular shift. This, again, is a good chart to review and get the concept of changes in supply so that you understand it for a quiz or a test. To conclude, understand the differences between the quantity demanded and supplied and a change in demand and supply. They are different concepts.